Oh, I'm so excited to have Ange De Lumiere back again. And we realized the last interview that I'd had with her last week was 2 years ago to the day that we've been doing this. Ange is this most incredible woman who loves to push boundaries and is a spiritual lawyer. So I'll get her to explain a bit about that. And if you haven't already seen one of our videos and our conversations. And today we're going to be talking about forgiveness, but she has a completely different take on it. And this is why I'm really excited to have her here. Welcome, Ange.
Thank you for having me. I have actually never talked about forgiveness openly or my view on forgiveness before. So I'm super, super grateful that you're having me today to explain spiritual lawyer as quickly as I can, because this is not about me. It's more about what's going to be useful for your audience. I was a high-flying corporate lawyer for 15 years, branched out and explored spirituality for 15 years in almost all its forms, although not through religion. And I'm now combining the two into an unusual combination, where I feel my mission is to debunk a lot of the myths and false truths that are told in spirituality. So here I am, spiritual lawyer, here to talk about the real laws.
Lovely.
in the spiritual-
Exactly. And I agree with you there. And I think I actually just only thought about it. I don't ever really introduce myself when I do this. I'm Chantal, holistic business counsel, holistic counselor supporting also women in business. And I love that because I'm looking at spirituality in a whole different way, having gone down the track of thinking spiritual is the only way to help me heal from trauma for a while there, to keep me away from the pain of what I was experiencing, and then feeling a heat. And that's why I love our conversations and about forgiveness, because let's just start unpacking what do we think forgiveness is. I've got my version, so why don't you start, Ange? What is for you forgiveness?
Oh, I'm not too sure.
Yeah,
But I would say, but I want to start with a story though, Chantal. Is that
please
okay?
do. Yeah.
Because we're tying this to spirituality here, right? And so the three practices that are pushed in people's faces again and again and again is meditation, gratitude, forgiveness as the three pillars of spirituality, right?
Yeah.
You agree?
Yes.
So we're talking about maybe um, we should do another session where we talk about the other two. But
Yes.
for now, and I'm almost want to remind me because I've never said this way before, the three pillars of spirituality, right? Um, so I want to start with a story.
Oh no, before you go, just give the three pillars
Yeah.
again so people get it. So it was just do those
Yeah.
again, then we'll do.
Meditation,
Yes,
gratitude, and forgiveness. These
that's
are
right.
the three traditional pillars of spirituality, right?
Great. I'm just going to open the door because we've got wind happening
Yep.
here. Sorry about this. Okay. Yes.
And that was really a wonderful conversation with everything happening,
That's
as it is. Okay, so I wasn't going to drink my breakfast, but I'm going to drink my breakfast, so I'm going to join you in
absolutely. And
the
this is
fun.
why I love these conversations and why I do them this way, because it's raw, organic, whatever comes up, comes up. So please do that. And I'm going to get my water. So everyone who's watching, this is what it can be like.
Hydrate,
Women
look
talking.
after yourselves.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
Right, so we're talking about forgiveness. So I want to start with a story, right? So in my family of origin, which I'm not in touch with a lot of them anymore, I suppose I was considered as spiritual, right, amongst other people, because I started learning about healing and angels and all sorts of things. And I went to a family reunion where I was actually confronted with a person, not going to name them, who had molested me as a child. And sadly, there are quite a few molesters in my family. And we were having a conversation with another person that I'm not going to name in relation to who we are as relatives. Otherwise, it's too revealing and I don't have permission to share their story. So I'm going to be cryptic, but it's for the protection of the people I'm talking about. Because I'm not here to point fingers either, okay? It's just a story, and I think it's an important one. I could say it was a client story, but I prefer to say it's mine because I think my lived experience of forgiveness and spirituality is important in the context of what I teach. And so I had completely repressed the molestation that happened to me when I was about 12 years old. And so I was tired that day when I went to that family reunion, and I had this massive flashback, completely triggered when I saw that person. And I happened to talk to that relative about it. And she looked at me and she said, you know, you're spiritual, you should just forgive him. Oh, you of all people. And this made me so angry. It made me so angry. I wanted to shut her down. Sorry, I said her. Should have said them. And I thought, who are you? And who do you think you are to tell me who to forgive and when to forgive? And I think that's where I want to start this conversation, because there is abuse in when we tell people they need to forgive, especially if we add to it, oh, but that's if you want to be spiritual, or if you want to whatever. And people want to be spiritual because maybe they, you know, they're afraid of the afterlife, whatever it is, whatever their motivation is. We cannot force people to forgive. We cannot coerce them into forgiving. We cannot manipulate them into forgiving, not even with pretty concepts. Because at the core of it, it is not possible to forgive until you are healed on some level. Mm-hmm. And if you ask someone to forgive before they are healed, before they've tended to their wounds, you're basically re-abusing them. So that's where I wanted to start this conversation. So having given that anecdote or that story, I believe that forgiveness is the act of letting go of a grudge when you've reached a point of healing that allows you not to feel the pain anymore.
I love that. Let's just pause, because I think that's really important, Ange, is for people to hear that, because I agree. I look back over, since we've been talking about this, you know, you and I having our conversations, I realized with some people, I wasn't ready to forgive, but I felt I had to. It was the right thing to do. It was the way to go at the time with Catholic religion, but also with that spirituality. That was part of my healing, was to forgive before I was ready.
Yeah. And that is not helpful. And I think that the spiritual community is doing a lot of harm to people who have been abused, or who have suffered at the hands of others, or who simply cannot let go of a grudge, because it needs to come from inside. And for it to happen, there needs to be a lot of compassion. And what my relative said to me, she wasn't my sister. I don't know why my sister came up to my mind. What is that person had absolutely no compassion for me. And that's what I needed in that moment. I had just had a memory of abuse from a relative, an adult relative, onto me when I was 12, which is such a tender age. And all she could say is, oh, surely by now you should have forgiven him. No. Absolutely no. And we have talked before, Chantal, maybe not publicly, about how important it is to create a safe space within the spiritual communities for people not to be re-traumatized, and for people not to be ostracized. And I think there's, I think we need to stop that right away.
And I agree with you. And I think we've talked about it in different ways, about how I look back on my experience. And in a way, you helped me see this as well, which was amazing. How, when I didn't understand where spirituality was going, because I've been working with energy for years. So again, it confused me. But I realized how I wanted to stay away from the pain. So I handed over my power to spiritualists and spirituality, because I wanted them to help me make better. And often they're the gurus and the egos that come with me. I will help you. I will do it for you. You know, and that we don't think about abuse. I didn't realize it would re-traumatize me. And it was you who helped me unpack that at the beginning of the year, when something did happen in the spiritual world. that took me a few weeks to even realize that I had been traumatized. Because, like you said, I thought it wasn't that bad. They knew what they're doing. So I put it out there. I just didn't think that I was abused. It was just a really amazing and powerful experience for me to see this is what happens to many, many people that we don't realize. We don't realize.
So I want to share another story of forgiveness as well. And it was a time when I forgave someone. So I wasn't asked to forgive them. They never apologized for what they did. And what they did was pretty offensive, I need to say. Not that we're ranking an event or, in whatever offensiveness it is, but it was very hurtful, very, very hurtful. And for years, actually, I carried that hurt. How could that person do that to me after I had been so kind to them? Almost like, biting the hand that feeds you, really that sort of dynamic. And I just held on, and I was waiting for the person to ask for forgiveness, right? That's another myth in the forgiveness playground. Let's put it like that, is that you are going to forgive the person because they're going to bend on their knees and ask you for forgiveness. That's another BS, right? Forgiveness is irrespective of the person who has hurt you. It is a completely personal thing. And my story illustrates that, because one day, and I don't know how it worked, although I do a lot of work on myself, I'm big on self-development, I'm big on self-healing, I'm big on, doing the work. And one day I just woke up and it was gone. And I realized that day how much of a burden I had carried for so long. And it felt amazing. And that person never said a word to say they were sorry. They never thanked me for all the things I did for them. None of that happened. It was all inner work. And that is a beautiful gift, because when it comes from inside, and when it comes from deep inside, and when it comes from the work that we do on ourselves, the gift is 1,000-fold.
I agree.
And it will gift you more than if the person asked you for forgiveness, because you have let go of the backpack of resentment that you've been carrying, right?
Yeah.
And I had actually an aha moment this morning about one of my exes, where I finally was able to see something that he gifted me in the relationship, which is allowing to chip away at the resentment I have for them. And so I am actually, today I have started my journey of forgiveness with regards to that particular person. And I'm not going to rush it. I'm not going to push it. I'm going to allow it to unfold, which is why I love the name of your business, Chantal.
Thank you.
It is truly unfolding your freedom. Forgiveness is that process where you free yourself of the bonds with other people, because you cannot change other people. You cannot force them to forgive you. You cannot force them to see that they have wronged you. This is a battle that is going to consume you, and you're never going to win it. So we can change the relationship of others by changing ourselves.
That's right. And I think, coming back to what you're saying as well, the word that popped into mind is expectations. If we keep wanting the other person to do something, we have expectations. And like you said, we can't control the other person. And as you said, it has to, and I really like the way you put it. It's a personal thing, all inner work. And that is the beautiful gift. They're your words. It's a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
Because it means you are ready to let go. You are owning your pain, whatever it is you're experiencing, to allow it to come through. And as you said, it has nothing to do with that person.
But it's very hard, because it's so much easier to resent the person and to make them responsible for your pain. And they are, to a certain extent, because they initiated it, right? So letting go of that bit is the hardest.
Yes.
Letting go of asking, requiring, expecting them to make things right for us.
Yes, I like that. Expecting them to make it right for us. That's exactly right. That's right. And I think that's what you said. That's
the
where
person
the pain
who molested me when I was 12 is never going to ask for forgiveness. They can't even see what they've done wrong. They keep
Yes.
doing the same thing. They boast about what they did. It's never going to change. So it's if I was expecting that person to come to me and say, I'm sorry, I would waste my breath. I would waste my life.
I'm just going to say, you'd be forever waiting.
Yeah. And we don't want to live in a holding pattern, holding on to our pain, holding on to our grudges. It's also very toxic for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think that's Thich Nhat Hanh who said this, but I'm not 100% sure. It could have just been a Buddhist saying. It's like holding on to a coal and that is burning your hands because, you know, but and when you could just let it go. It's only hurting you.
And I think with that, even though, you know, it's burning your hand, you get so used to the burn that you don't realize that you're actually still holding on and it's still burning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I suppose forgiveness is first to let go of the coal, put it somewhere, look at it, poke at it, do whatever it is so that it doesn't burn you anymore.
Yeah.
And then it goes up in smoke and you're done, and that's it. You can move on.
Yeah. Yes, and I think forgiveness, I think it's also like you said, I don't know about you with the Catholic Church, but for me with the Catholic Church, we had to go and ask forgiveness for our sins. We had to go to confession. There's always all that around it, but we had to do something. It was somehow our fault. And I could never understand that. So I found the concept of forgiveness very hard in the end. And then I also found with forgiveness was I letting the person off the hook? Did that mean that they didn't do it? So all that swirls around as well. But it actually has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, and you've touched on something very, very salient and very important, is that we are afraid if we let go of that grudge, if we let go of that, that somehow they get a free ride.
That's exactly right.
And we can get hooked to that.
Yep.
But doing that is doing nothing productive, nothing good for us. It's that burning coal in our hands.
Yep. Exactly.
So it's important to take a step back. And perhaps I would say the first thing to do is to do a sort of audit of how much damage this is doing to your life, this resentment, this bitterness, this anger. And it's not to say you shouldn't express it. Actually, that's probably the first thing you should do, is to acknowledge all the negative emotions, all the negative thoughts, and honor them. Honor them. Find someone, you've helped me a lot with this, Chantal. Find someone who can create a safe space where you can rant, swear, cry, stamp your feet, and go to the bottom of that, because at the same time, we don't allow ourselves to fully feel these emotions. And until you have, they never die. They stay in the body, they're trapped.
Exactly. That's where that toxicity comes into our body, and then that reflects in our body through illnesses, cancers, pains, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Depression, emotionally, all that.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. And
it's kind of unusual to say, well, forgiveness, the first step is to actually feel the pain and express it and go to the full length of it, because we don't like uncomfortable emotions. I'm the first one to say that, you know. I've been going through so many uncomfortable emotions this year. It's probably been the worst year. Well, actually, probably not. but
but in your awareness.
And now I've learned to sit with them, honor these emotions rather than trying to avoid them.
Yes. And I think I'd like to actually
voice them.
Yes.
Go ahead, sorry.
So, and I like to say, rather than avoid them, my big thing is rather than avoiding and bypassing. Because I literally get this vision of it going, whoops, and out the door, whoops, you know. Yeah. Sorry, you're going to say.
But that's because I know this is not about an interview about anger, but we have considered anger as a society, as in our culture, anger is a big taboo.
Yes. That's right.
So we don't want to acknowledge and anger. I've just written actually an article on Medium about truly spiritual people get angry or get angry. This is important to acknowledge, because anger is healthy is a healthy emotion. All negative emotions are healthy. They're here to signal to you something is not right. And if you ignore that, then you're not addressing the problem.
I agree with you. And it just stays in your body. Can I just, one thing you mentioned about anger, we used to have the Kyoto Tibetan monks come to Perth to visit, and they would do 5 days of all sorts of rituals and conversations. And a young boy was sitting listening. They translated because it was in Tibetan. And this lovely young boy of 12 sat there, and he was looking up, and because, he goes, do you ever get angry? Do you ever get angry? And the monk said, yes, we do. That is part of being human. That's part of life. We express the anger, we feel the anger, and then we move on. And I remember just thinking, it was about 10 years ago, it really hit me. Yes, because they come, you know how they have such a lovely demeanor of peace and calm. But he said, no, that's what we work on. Because they might have it is.
And that is why Buddhism has always been one of the spiritual traditions that has most appealed to me.
Yeah.
Because there's not of that hypocrisy, there's not of that suppression that we have in, well, I'm going to talk about Catholicism because that's what I was raised with. It's so toxic. It just doesn't work. And it encourages people to be passive aggressive, to be hypocritical, to pretend they're not feeling something that they are, which then means that they're literally projecting all their crap on other people. And it's just, it's dysfunctional, completely dysfunctional.
Oh, it's completely dysfunctional, toxic, abusive. Because I think coming back, and we've talked about this before, and I can't, but this is all about the forgiveness and that, like going to, and I'm writing it actually in my memoir, which by the way, Ange is helping me with, amazing. And I've been writing a bit about that with Dad's Catholicism, as I said, going to confession. I could never understand how Dad could, I don't know everyone he confessed in there, because like, you don't know, but how he could go in there, obviously get forgiveness, then come home and still be nasty and bash us up. I never understood that. So for me, forgiveness never made sense. How could this happen? Like you said, because the anger was still there, the violence was still there, we were still fearful, yet we were meant to still love this man, because he was my father, despite it all going, because the church has said, it's okay, go and do your Hail Marys. I'm being facetious now, so no disrespect to anyone, but that's how I feel about the church. I'm just going to do a few Hail Marys.
I felt the same about, I felt a little bit the same about the confession, and because it was, and I'm going to say something about my own dad. He was a devout Catholic, but of all the Catholics I encountered in my life, and I encountered many, because in France it's one of the big religions, he was completely congruent with himself. He didn't act outside of church differently than he acts inside of the church. But for most people that I knew, they didn't. They had one behavior in church and then a completely different one outside, because of this thing that it doesn't matter, we'll get the absolution if we confess, and that's it. So it was like this, okay, reset, almost like a reset button. I'm going to do everything, it doesn't matter, then I'll get my blessing, and then I can move on.
Oh no, not only move on, not only move on,
do it again.
Carry on. There's this little tiny blip, so
So but this is where, and I want to highlight this is where human beings use the system, because I'm sure to start with it was a beautiful practice. When you experience something, and I want to get to that, because I believe that forgiving ourselves is probably a lot harder than forgiving others. And I'm going to get to that, because even today I woke up feeling incredibly guilty as a mum, and finding it very, very hard to forgive myself for the mistakes that I've made as a parent. And I'm sure a lot of parents will resonate with what I'm saying. We make so many mistakes as parents, it's inevitable. But we are so harsh on ourselves about judging ourselves that we should have done better, and this and that, and putting unreasonable expectations on ourselves, unreasonable standards. And yet I think this is probably the most difficult and the most important practice in spirituality is self-forgiveness.
It is. And I find it interesting. I'd like then your opinion on this too. I know for me, to start with forgiveness, I needed to work on someone else first before I could do myself. Because as you said, doing it on myself was so hard. It felt easier to go outward versus inward. How have you found that in your healing journey path?
So I still have so much forgiveness to do
For
because I
yourself?
was raised, I would say generally, because
Generally, yeah.
well, I was raised by an incredibly judgmental parent.
Yeah.
And so I have this inner voice that is constant and exhausting and constantly judging and trying to pitch myself as better than everybody else. Now I know the voice has no reality, that it's just a voice, it's just an echo of someone who said things to me in the past, but it's still there constantly. So I think for me, the very first step is not to get into judgment. I try to
Yes.
nip
Yes.
everything, nip judgment in the bud, because then I don't go into this whole I have to forgive you, because there's nothing to forgive if you don't judge, basically.
I
Right?
like that. Just say that again. I like that.
There's nothing to forgive if you don't judge.
That's it. I love that. I had never thought of it that way. So really what we're saying here, doing the reverse, instead of I'm just putting it out there and anyone commenting, be interesting, it's perhaps learning to not judge and then the forgiveness will happen rather than doing it the other way around. I'm wondering, just what you said. Because if I could learn, so I'm just thinking, if I could have learned, which I can now do, not to judge the person, well, then that can help. Yeah. Then that takes all of that away, doesn't it? A lot of it away, I should say.
There's also another thing. So there's the judgment, but there's also our own scars,
Yeah.
our own belief system, because people cannot hurt us unless there's something to hurt.
Yes.
And the more we have baggage, the more we have scars or even wounds that are still open, the easier it's going to be for other people to hurt us. So if we do a sort of audit of our wounds, so to speak,
Yes,
and we become aware of how people can hurt us,
yes,
then we know where the work needs to be done. So in a
yes,
way, when someone hurts us, they do us a favor, because it's like they're shining a light on the area of our lives, of our psyche, of our emotion, of our heart, of our mind, whatever, or even physically, that needs attention. Because if you hit a strong tree with a hammer, you are not going to break it. But if you hit a tree that's already decaying, then you destroy it. It's that thing, you know. Not that I want to speak with a metaphor of violence, but it's the strength will not do harm or will not break down something that's not weak already. And again, there's no judgment on the weak part, right? But I think it's our job to strengthen ourselves.
I was going to say
our job to heal ourselves.
Yes.
It's our job to have that awareness of knowing where our sensitive areas are, so that we don't lash out, because otherwise we are going to lash out onto people.
Yeah. I like that, because I know when I seeing this, or I still see the psychologist, but something she said to me when I was looking at going for supervision to look at who I am as a counselor, as much as the patient, the client, sorry. And we're talking about this, that she said her work with me with her clients is about inner strength. So I always thought it was about confidence. And she actually took me to another space. As you said, it's about strength. And I realized that over the last few years, the stronger I become within, like you're saying, the more I'm able to deal with this and more able to, be able to see it for what it is. So it is about strength and inner strength.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. And I said, like you said, becoming aware of where your sensitive areas are, because I then use the word, when I become aware of that, instead of reacting, I may respond, or I can walk away, or I don't take it on board, rather than lashing out and dumping too, and just making it all worse.
Yeah.
Mm.
And this is our responsibility toward world peace.
Yes, yes, yes.
Because for as long as we have these things inside us that are angry or hurt, when I say angry, I think an angry wound. that is festering, or even maybe there's pus in it, and it's so painful that the smallest touch or poke is going to make us react, then we are not safe people to be around.
And I think that's really interesting, because once upon a time I would have found that really quite hard, triggering to hear we are not, to say that we are not safe to be around. But it's true. It's true. Because the other person, you're giving me so much food for thought here, Ange, as always, you know. I would have found that hard, because I would have thought, well, that's why I love interviewing you. So I would have then thought that you were, so if I'd heard you say that to me in the past, I would have thought, oh, she's judging me. Somehow it's still my fault. How dare she? Because when you're still in the blaming game and still out there, something like that is triggering, or can be triggering, you know?
Yeah, and I think we're deconstructing a lot of that pain. I see that almost like a pain ball of yarn, right?
Yes.
When you're wrapped up in that pain system, then everything is painful. Considering that you might be that you have to take responsibility for your pain is feels unjust. It feels unfair.
That's it.
That you have to become a safe person for other people, that's unfair, because other people are not safe for me. Why should I be the first one to do the work? Why should it be on me when there's so many people out there that are not doing the right thing? We want everybody to be fixed so that we can be safe, but in reality we're the only person who can make a safe space for ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. And we can do that by creating boundaries for people who hurt us. That's the first step. Without lashing out, better. If that's the only thing you can do at the moment, but then it's still a good step. And we need to peel back and pull back all that energy that we put out in the world that we need for our own healing anyway. Yeah. We're wasting our energy on other people when we needed to focus on ourselves to get better, to heal, and to become beacons of light and love and compassion in the world.
Yeah. And I like that. And I think coming back to what you said earlier about those intense emotions, initially I was scared of even feeling them, let alone expressing them in a healthy way. And that's where I think for me to do it, I needed to find a safe space, which was with a psychologist and a therapist, because I needed to allow them to come up and out, but somewhere where someone could hold me without judgment and say, it's okay to feel angry, it's okay to feel rage, or it's okay to feel resentment and jealousy. Because like you said, otherwise I would keep lashing out, because that was my tender spot. That's the stuff that I protected, you know, and boof, out I went.
Yeah.
So like you spray it all over the place, not realizing what you're actually doing it, because you aren't able to see your own role in this. So yeah, so I think coming back to, and I think we've talked about this before, or I know for me, I had to be the good girl. Good girls or nice girls don't feel that. You know, you had the nice smile on your face.
So, and I agree with you. That's why therapy done by people who are in supervision and who consider being safe container the highest priority in their work is so important, because there's no other safe space to express these difficult emotions in the world. If we share with a friend, they're going to try and make things better for us, or they might actually throw oil on the fire. Either way, they don't create that neutral space. If we go to a spiritual teacher, they might shut you down saying, this is not very spiritual. Now, hopefully the real spiritual teachers won't say that, but I'm exaggerating things a little bit, but there's a lot of that going on, you know.
In the guise, I agree with you now that my eyes have opened, in the guise of that. And I think it's coming at something I'm learning. How do I talk about it? Where's the fine line? Is a lot of people have had traumatic or big experiences and don't understand how much it's affected them. And then I know for me, I didn't understand that I was being re-triggered the whole time. In fact, being spiritual the way I thought I was being was actually doing me personally more harm. I didn't get that, because I was bypassing the anger, because I was doing that, you know, sitting there, I was pretending, bypassing, avoiding, using distractions, not realizing in fact that it was still stagnant in here. was festering.
Yeah, and I think one of the big problems we have in society, I'm talking about where I live now, UK, I don't want to talk for the entire world, obviously, but it's that we have defined trauma and abuse at such high levels that most people don't recognize when it happens to them, because they're constantly minimizing, saying someone has it worse than me. So for me, I never thought I had an abusive childhood. I never thought I suffered trauma, because for me, trauma was going to be being sexually abused by your dad, or it was going to be having your entire family decimated in a war, or, you know, like what's happening sadly in Israel at the moment. This was trauma. What I was experiencing was like, you know, ridiculous in comparison. And so I never considered or even thought that I had experienced trauma. And I think even though I'm not an expert about trauma, the little I've learned has made me realize that trauma is not a competition. There's not a scale, because everybody reacts. It's more the reaction you have within yourself and how much it's affecting you, rather than the external event.
Exactly.
So you could be traumatized because someone laughed at you when you were doing something very brave, whereas someone else will not even give it the light of day. That's because they have more inner strength.
That's exactly right.
This is not a judgment, though. I need to say this around. Being stronger, you know, within yourself is not being a better person than a person that doesn't have that strength. It's just we're all on the journey. We all start where we are, and what we need to be stronger on ourselves. And being stronger in ourselves, I can already hear some people saying, yeah, but I don't want to become a bully. Because when you lean into that strength and that power, then of course immediately the fears about abusing that power and that strength come to mind. Which is why, actually, as I'm talking out loud about this topic, I realize this is why I've always avoided being as strong as or seeing myself stronger than I am, because I don't want to be that strong person, because I've had so many supposedly strong people boss me around and bully me. So there's this whole
that's it.
difficulty.
It is. And then again, when you think about it, but actually not being strong, it is the bullying aspect. So again, it's about, this could be a whole nother conversation. How do we unpack strength? Because I was like you, I was too strong, to this, to that. But I'm realizing my strength now is because I know more who I am. I know what my reactors are. I know what upsets me more. So that to me is the inner strength. And inner strength also means that I have the courage to do things I didn't before, to look at the work that I do. So there's ways and different ways of looking at strength, you know, because like you, I felt the same. And I want to come back also to what you're saying about the traumas. I can't remember where I read it. So whether it was Peter Levine or one of the trauma ones, big T's and little T's. See, we all focus on the big trauma, which is said, which is what you're talking about. We don't look at the little traumas. And what for you is a little trauma, for me could be big, and vice versa. And that's why it's so easy to dismiss someone. Wasn't that bad? Because for you, it might not have been that bad. For the person, it was. And this comes back to, like you said, having a safe container to be able to go to and be in. That neutral space. I really like that word, that neutral space, but doesn't mean there's not empathy there and kindness, love and all that. But it's the person can come and they know they're going to be able to be there without judgment, without pushback.
So I like that you're talking about neutral, because sometimes people think neutral is cold.
Yeah.
And I have been considered cold by a lot of people, because I had that neutral space and didn't want to engage in the drama. I didn't want to pull into, is this horrible what happened to me? There's a big difference in being pulled into the drama or just holding the space and saying, I completely understand what you're going through. This is a very valid emotion. Please tell me more. I want to hear about it. At first, for people who've never been to therapy, that might feel strange. And it will, because it's so unusual. But it's actually a lot healthier than having someone rally in or trying to shut you down. Because there might not be as much passion or signs of passion. Actually, I believe that people who do this work are passionate about supporting people. So the passion comes in another way. Yeah. But it's not in the affection kind of mode that people are used to, or that sometimes people seek. So I do want to explain that about therapy, because I've had my share amount of therapy myself. I started when I was 9 years old. You know, that's when I started therapy for the first time. So, but once you lean into that space, you learn to really value it and enjoy it, and you can use it as your own instead of trying to ask validation from your therapist. This is not a space of validation. This is a space of taking responsibility, exploring. And also, I think at the start of the therapeutic relationship, sometimes we might try to please our therapist. We say the things that we think they want to hear. And this is something I want to share that I've done with you that I've never done with any other therapist, because we've been working, you've been my therapist since February or March, something like that. I have never swore and be as angry with you as I've ever done with anyone else. And I think it's a wonderful thing, because I need that. And I need to give myself permission to express all these emotions, to free myself from the bondage to these emotions. And unless I find a space where I don't care what you think, Chantal, if I swear and say fuck every 5 minutes, or if I say really, things that are shocking, I have to be able to say them, because we all have it in us. And if we pretend that it's not in us, we are actually, it's almost like we're letting other people deal with that problem rather than us. And we're gonna act out on it at some point.
And I thank you for sharing that, Ange, because I remember also, and this is again interesting to be able to talk about this also from a counselor's point of view. It's also known, because this is what my supervisor taught me, it's also known when should I encourage you and just push you that little bit. Because initially you were very, I can't do that because I'm meant to be, it goes against what I want, but I knew somehow. But the other thing you pointing out, and the other word that I have found is with the safe container, and this comes back to that neutral part. Because I could sit there and be neutral about hearing that, because I knew it wasn't nothing to do with me. It was you needing to bring that up. That's the neutrality. That's that in that space in between me versus you, and me knowing that has nothing to do with me. You need to bring that up and out. And the other thing was, therefore, it builds a trust. There's a trust there now between us. You also mentoring me for my memoir, because that is bringing stuff up for me. So there's this beautiful trust happening here. Safe, trust, neutral, kindness. That is where beautiful healing can happen for me.
So can I feedback on that as well? And just because there are going to be some people who listen to us who are going to think, how is it even possible that these two women coach each other or support each other? Or because that goes against that flies in the face of all of what's taught in psychology, counseling, etc.
Good point.
But, and this is where I want to bring that element to it, I've seen it happen again and again when two people are emotionally mature enough, they've done enough work on themselves, but also there's that spiritual element to it, that it is possible, but it is very rare. I wouldn't encourage people to get into that sort of relationship, because if you have beef with each other, or if you have things that can come up, or you're not aware of what's yours, right? So I've always said, at one point in my life, I decided I was going to be laser clear about what stuff is mine and what is not mine. And once I started doing that, actually, that's probably when I started making the most progress, because I had a tendency before that to take on everybody's problems as my own and thinking it was my problem, which is, I think, a sign of codependency, which I've unpacked over the years. So you need to have that really clear base and being very, very self-conscious and have done enough work on yourself, I suppose, to be a counselor, really, because that's where you're supposed to be. Which sometimes I think a 3-year training course is not enough, to be honest. It might give you some tools, but if I think about it, how could you learn that in 3 years? Not to discourage people who want to study it, I nearly did this myself. But I think the work is never done. There's always more layers.
Yeah.
There's always more layers to peel. There's always, and I want to bring this a little bit into the space, because we talked about how it's doing work on yourself that's going to help you with the forgiveness, with true forgiveness, as opposed to, you know, a rubber. I'm thinking of a plaster on a wooden leg, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's an expression in English, but it's you know, you have a wooden leg and you have all this resentment and everything, but you put this little plaster, I forgive you, and then you think everything's going to be okay.
It's done.
No, it is not. The plaster's going to fall off that wooden leg, and then the leg's going to set on fire. Whatever. So I want to say it's important to find people who are safe if you're seeking the support for forgiveness, because we don't go to therapists for forgiveness. We would probably go more to a spiritual teacher or whatever, or make sure that person is safe. If anything in your body tells you that you have to run away, trust it and run away.
And run away.
Yeah. Super important, because I like to say, and I'm probably going to say it in every episode you interview me, it's a spiritual jungle out there. Right. And as you know, I don't know if I mentioned it last time, one of the episodes on my podcast, True Spirituality with Ange, is how to cult proof your spiritual journey. There are people out there who prey on your insecurities, your weaknesses, your naivety, your trust, to rope you in, control you, manipulate you, abuse you, whatever. Yeah, that's it's rife in that field.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned your podcast, because anyone, when you're listening, I will be popping the link into the notes, because I think it's really important that you do that. And I think also another point you made, thank you for pointing out that, because normally, no, you don't have that reciprocal relationship. Absolutely right. And it's not the norm what we have. And I suppose the way I saw it was, I see you as my coaching mentor versus being a counselor. So I think I'm going to justify it a bit like that. But yes, but we have a trust with each other, because we've got enough strength, maturity, and ability, and we know each other really well, that we can say, hey, you know, we can support each other. But it's definitely not the norm. Definitely not the norm, what we have.
Well, I would say I would never accept to have that kind of relationship with someone else if I didn't feel that I can hold the space without letting my stuff coming into it.
That's it.
And I've done it many, many times, actually. I've had clients who have become mentors and vice versa. And sometimes it's one after the other. Sometimes it's at the same time. I use my intuition for that. And I know right away if it's going to work or not. And if it doesn't, and if someone wanted to experiment with that, and at one point it didn't work out, then it's very important just to say as it is as soon as the problem comes up. And yeah, set the boundary.
It is about setting the boundary, because I know I had the experience. I thought it would work with this person and it didn't, and we've ended up not friends. So I learned a big lesson with that, big lesson. And I think it's about what you're saying. You have to have done enough work. You have to have the maturity. You have to also set clear guidelines. And I just wrote a post the other day, rumbling, you know, I love Brené Brown. We're talking about her before we started. You know, she says it in Dare to Lead, I think, is rumbling with vulnerability. It's being able to talk about have those difficult conversations with each other, because that creates trust and openness, and then being able to listen to what the other person says without interrupting, and hearing that, and then going, hey, yeah, actually valid point, no, not valid point, that's yours, that's mine, where do we meet in the middle? And I love that. You know, then you can be vulnerable with each other, you know, and this can then tie back to not so much forgiveness. How would you tie this back into forgiveness, Ange? You know?
Well, I think it's not all situations for sure. There could be situations where we have to forgive someone because we weren't clear enough on our boundaries, and the person used that opportunity but it was a dance.
It is a dance, that's right.
So this is not always the case. I'm going to make a very big distinction with, you know, the typical persecutor, victim type in, you know, I'm thinking domestic violence or all sorts of things like
Narcissism.
that. Yeah, so there's a limit, right? And we mustn't cross. When that gets to that, then we have to be laser clear of what's happening. But for most of the other kinds of relationship that are dysfunctional without being abusive, there's a dance. And with that dance, we have to forgive ourselves for dancing with the other person, and we have to forgive the other person for dancing with us. Or maybe we don't have to forgive anything, and we should just look at what's been happening, making an assessment and deciding what do we want instead.
That's it. But because I've just, the word that keeps coming through for me at the moment is I am sorry. And I think sometimes it's appropriate where it's okay. Sometimes I needed to say, look, I'm sorry that happened, because I might have had the right, like how I delivered something might have been the tone of voice. I think there's that fine line, as you said, just saying, hey, I'm sorry that happened. I'm sorry you felt, or I'm sorry that I did that. You know, particularly when you've worked on yourself, that takes courage to do that. You know, and strength to sometimes say, hey, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. You know, but it doesn't mean that you take responsibility for how the person reacted, because you can't be responsible for how the person reacts.
It's a whole other debate in a way, because asking for forgiveness is another chapter. I think up to now we've talked about forgiving someone else. We haven't even gone down the road of I'm going to ask someone for forgiveness. But this immediately made come to my mind, and I know we're going to have more conversations, so we don't need to dive into that second one that we've just opened the door to, and we're like on the threshold thinking, whoa, that's another hour of discussion. But I want to, because this is a sacred conversation, which I am going to assume is more about spirituality. I want to mention the Ho'oponopono prayer, because and I don't know if your audience doesn't know what it is. It's this 4-sequence prayer that I think comes from the Hakuna tradition, Hawaiian. That says, thank you, no, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. So these 3 phrases that you almost used as a mantra. And I like to listen to a recorded version of this this practice, just to soothe myself when I'm working on something really difficult. So I'd like to leave that maybe with your audience, if they want to start with that, without pointing fingers as who needs to be forgiven, who should ask for forgiveness, what was wrong, what went wrong, whatever. We just want to take it to the next level and saying, we have probably made as many mistakes as the other person. We have probably hurt people without knowing that we had. The work is more to start soothing ourselves around people who've hurt us, how we've hurt other people, and all that pain, and start to melt the pain. And you don't melt the pain with judgment. You melt the pain with compassion and love and kindness.
That's exactly right. And I do, because I'm not sure how many, I know I've got a meditation on the Ho'oponopono that I might put the link to, because it's a very powerful, honoring. I might put that into the links too, because I've used that a lot. And like you said, and this will sort of come, we'll finish soon, because we could go on. We've got so many topics we could talk about. But I found what I loved is that sometimes I would just say it without needing to know why I was saying it. I would just say it. Or I'd bring the situation or the person in that I wanted something around. I would just go, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And that's all. I just kept repeating that without needing to do anything else. You know, it's a beautiful prayer.
And I just had a vision, which I've never had before, of actually describing the situation on a piece of paper at the center of the paper, and then writing the 4 different at each corner, and then maybe making a piece of art or adding some color or some sort of into it as a sort of mandala to, you know, place it. And the reason I'm saying this is because I'm a Reiki master and I teach people how to do Reiki mandalas, and suddenly I had this feeling that would really be helpful. Because you're writing it down, you're getting it out of your system, putting it on paper, and asking maybe something bigger than you to come and help you with that particular situation.
And I like that, something bigger than you. I think that'd be a beautiful way to end. So I'm just going to recap it. You said some paper out. You could even do it as art. Then what did you say? You put it in the 4. So just repeat it, because that'd be the lovely way to end. So say
you write the situation. You write the situation. You describe it in your best words at the center of the piece of paper.
Yes.
Then you write in the 4 corners, thank you, I love you, please forgive me. And the 4th one I'm trying to remember.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you write these 4. And then for people who know about Reiki, actually, what you can add to it is to have the symbol shokure at each corner of the paper. On the right-hand side, you have it the way you've learned to do it. On the left side, you invert it. And then in the center, you do the Seiheki in yellow, and then you do Hansha Seishonen in blue. I'm sorry if people feel like they're left out if they haven't trained in Reiki 2. I could do another whole series about Reiki and the beauty of it. I am passionate about it.
Yeah, same here.
I actually have an online course that I teach people with that is about to come out, called Energy Intelligence for Sensitive Entrepreneurs. That is mostly based on Reiki, but not entirely. I think it's what I like. Oh gosh, we're starting on this as well. But the reason I like Reiki above other practices is that it's got this neutrality. It's not attached to religion. It's not attached to any beliefs. It's not even attached to outcomes. It's pure unconditional love.
I was going to say
symbols that help us connect to it, so that we don't bring our stuff into it. So yeah, maybe I'm just gonna sum it up that way, which is why this mandala came to my mind, and I wanted to share it with it, because you can do it whether you know about Reiki or not. But then I suppose if you have the Reiki symbols in your Reiki level 2, then you can take it to the next level.
Then you can take it to another level. And I think, and the other thing, like you said, is then if you, I know when I was wanting to forgive, or something was happening with someone, I couldn't do it myself. So I asked, and something bigger, get support from something other than yourself. That helped me. So I knew something was happening when I couldn't do it. So that's really lovely. I think we'll do something about Reiki, because I'm Reiki master like you, and I'm passionate about it. And I call it purity. It's just pure love. And it knows what to do and where to go. And that's a whole nother conversation, because I've got stories around that as well. So thank you everyone for watching. As I said, I'll pop the show notes. We're going to have the Ho'oponopono prayer, the meditation in there. I'll put in Ange's detailed spirituality with Ange. If you like, do subscribe, and on either hers or mine. Get the notifications, because we're going to be having many different conversations. Please put comments in so we can respond, because this is what it's all about. You may agree, you may not agree. It might trigger something in you. It might give you something else to think about. And that's what we are wanting. And you might go, no, actually, I don't agree with that at all. But thank you for giving me that option to think differently. And that's what I'm loving about these conversations. So thank you, Ange, as always.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. And I'm sure we'll be doing more. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.